Mondays.
Hey, what's happening, gamers? It's been a while, but Retro Mondays is back to make your Monday into a fun day once again. Today's classic game is Kirby's Dreamland 3, which was the final first-party release for the Super Nintendo back in 1997. Now, of course, this game was developed by HAL Laboratory and based on the Game Boy Dreamland series of the same name. Coincidentally, though, Dreamland 3 does not have a big fan following and was not well received by the critics back in the day either. But it's not that this was a bad game, mind you, it just wasn't what gamers were expecting after the well-liked and received Kirby Superstar. Now, the game actually takes place on Popstar, where Kirby and friends call home for most of the games in the series. Anyway, a dark cloud looms over the sky, which ends up breaking the world's surrounding rings in the process. Kirby and his friend Gooey head off to free Dreamland from the hands of dark matter. Kirby's Dreamland 3 features a lot of gameplay from the previous games, like the platforming, flying, swimming, and copying the enemy's powers to defeat them, all the while surrounded by bright, cheerful, and happy environments. In Dreamland 3, Kirby needs to travel across 5 different parts of Popstar, though the little puffball isn't alone and has his animal partners to tag along and help him out. Some of you may be familiar with 3 of the animal friends, such as Rick, Coo, and of course the fish that all appeared in Dreamland 2 for the Game Boy. This time around, Kirby actually adds 3 more animal friends to the pack, and like before, they change Kirby's powers depending on which friend you're using at the time. Gooey's role is much bigger than the last game, and he can be controlled by the computer or a second player. Though to be quite honest, I didn't use him all that much, as he removes some of Kirby's health when you use him. Now, unlike past Kirby games, in each of the 5 worlds is a character that requires your partner's help. If Kirby and friends manage to complete all the tasks, he will earn a Heart Star. Once all the Heart Stars are obtained, the player will be able to face the real final boss, Dark Matter. One of the biggest differences you'll see with this Kirby game is the graphics and overall style, which now resembles that of a child's coloring book. In order to get the pastel or crayon-like look of the game, HAL used a rendering technique they called Pseudo High Resolution for the Super Nintendo. Even though this game wasn't very popular, I can still remember how cool I thought the graphics looked when I was younger. Still, that doesn't mean I don't have anything wrong with this game, because, well, I do. In the last Kirby games, there seemed to be a better balance of things. Our little hero had the ability after a level to gain power-ups or heal himself. This game offers no such thing. Because in reality, it's not that the game is difficult or anything like that, but what makes it very frustrating is starting the levels with very low health or no power whatsoever. I never died as much in a Kirby game as I have with this one. Another thing I didn't enjoy was the lack of power-ups to begin with. Now, the game only has 8 power-ups in the entire game, and that's including the new sweep ability. So awesome that the sweep replaced something great like the sword, isn't it? Oh well, at least it can make Kirby fly like Harry Potter when teamed with this pink goo thing. Even so, I have to say this game got rather boring for me. This had to do with the fact that the game repeats the same heart challenges every single world. I could actually see this working once or twice in the game, but the entire game? No! It's just too repetitive. It goes from don't step on the flowers, find a toy, bring an animal friend to this friend, and solve memory puzzles, etc., and that's the whole game, folks. This bugged me constantly because they could have added some variety to the different challenges, because variety is the spice of life after all, but they didn't. Still, I digress, because Dreamland 3 does have some pretty good stuff too. For starters, while the power-ups are very limited, the ones that work very well, either teamed with an animal buddy or by themselves. Take the umbrella or parasol for instance. This weapon is so awesome that you're almost untouchable when fighting any boss, including King DDD. This is all thanks to the blocking, which is done by pressing down. Now, Kirby places the parasol in front of him, and let me tell you, this was my go-to weapon for most of the game. Another neat addition is all the extra animal friends. I really liked playing as the kitty because, well, I'm a cat person at heart, so you know I'm gonna like that. The cat's abilities have to do with double jumping, and for the most part, he just rolls Kirby like a ball of yarn. I thought that was so clever. The other animals are pretty cool too, but the only other one I really liked from the new additions has to be the bird, because he has some really cool powers, and I thought it was funny that Kirby controls him like a remote control toy when he's using the electric powers. Rick is still my favorite character, and it was nice to see him again. Graphics really stood out to me for this game. Some of my favorite worlds had to be the winter and fire-based ones. Looking back on this game, I can see some very early influences for Kirby's Epic Yarn though. Music and sound effects were okay for this game, but it's quite the contrast from the other Kirby games. Actually, the whole game has a very laid-back feel to it, which I don't mind personally. I'm just used to the more energetic and upbeat Kirby tunes. This game has some stages that bring back the classic and fast Kirby songs, but for the most part, it's a laid-back, peaceful thing, and that's okay. One thing I really liked about this game though was all the cameos and fan service it had. Though while the extra Famicom and Super Famicom appearances were very nice, I didn't really know who the characters were. However, the Metroid and Samus appearances were really well done, and I remember being so excited when I was younger. In fact, in order to defeat the Metroids, you need to use Kirby's ice power to freeze them, just like Samus's Ice Beam. Talk about cool. Frankly, replay value for this game wasn't too bad at all. There is a boss rush mode that's unlocked after you beat the game 100%. The only thing that changes though is the background colors, and the bosses are a little bit more challenging. What made this game stand out for many folks was the Heart Star missions though, and as I said before, they're a mixed bag. I did like though, if you don't want to use the animal pals at all, then you can play the game as just Kirby. So I challenge you guys to try that sometime because it gives the player a different way to play this game. In terms of lasting appeal, well, after this game, the series kind of went to sleep like Metroid for several years. However, in 2000, the Crystal Shards released on the N64, and then 2 years later, Kirby's Adventure got a remake dubbed Nightmare in Dreamland for the Game Boy Advance. After that, Kirby was definitely a living, breathing franchise for Nintendo once again. When the Wii released, Dreamland 3 was promised along with some other titles like Earthbound and GoldenEye to be on the Virtual Console system. Though unfortunately, only one of these games, Dreamland 3, would ever make it on the downloadable service, and it wouldn't be until 2009. In conclusion, while I said this was originally my favorite Kirby game of all time, I was wrong. And replaying this game again proved my suspicions, and it just wasn't as much fun as I remember it. Then again, I think the reason I held this game in high regard was the fact that I considered it to be one of the last great Super Nintendo games. And back then, my hype and excitement was enough for that statement to be valid. Though today, not so much. For me, Kirby's Nightmare in Dreamland on the Game Boy Advance is definitely my favorite Kirby game. For this game, the absence of Link, Sword Kirby, and the removal of the health and weapon rooms just doesn't sit well with me at all. Although when you look at what this game did have to offer, it was presented very well, and I like how unique the gameplay and overall feel for the game really was, and it really wasn't that bad. It's just not as good as some of the later Kirby games. Even so, I'm gonna leave this game's verdict up to all of you. The game is still on the Wii's Virtual Console, and the art style is very impressive if you want to check it out. I would advise not shooting for 100% though, unless you're a die-hard Kirby fan, because it can make the game a bit unfair at times and suck all the fun right out of it. Alrighty then, thus wraps up another Retro Mondays. Join me next time for the fighting game that changed fighters as we know it today, Street Fighter II by Capcom. If you're new to my stuff, why not subscribe, and if you like what you saw, it would be wicked sweet if you could hit the thumbs up button. I also have a Facebook, Twitter, and music album on iTunes if you want to check those out too. Well, thanks so much for watching another Retro Mondays, and until we meet again, gamers, hope your Thanksgiving was awesome, God bless and happy gaming, and have a great rest of your day.